My lighting's okay, right?
I think it looks great.
It's fine. Good enough.
I think you always look great, Christian.
Just wait till December
So wait till the winter months come around.
and the baby's here.
Hey, one of my good buddies back here in Minnesota just had his first kid.
Yeah,
I think
how's
you
he
guys are
doing?
about the same age.
He dead
Yeah, he's
inside?
good. Yeah, no, I think he loves it. I think he's doing just fine. Anyways, we got fun one today, another reaction video from Christian and I. So if you watched the very beginning of the podcast, you'll see where I posted a quick video of um, Squat University that we're looking at today, and you'll see my kind of non-verbal facial reaction to it. And I just showed Christian the video, and now we're gonna do some back and forth and talk about what we think of it. So yeah. Anyways, like I said, today we're doing Squat University, so give credit there to the video that we're doing. And yeah, Christian, I'm gonna let you kind of start it out this morning. And what did you think of the video? And where do you want to start?
Can I give a preamble first so people know how I feel about Squat University?
You sure you can? If they haven't heard our previous podcast on it,
Yeah,
on
and
some of the stuff.
uh, overall, I think Squat U guy is pretty good. I think generally he means well. There's a lot of good information out there, but he also says a lot of things that are just flat out untrue, or they oversimplify what's going to be helpful for people. And if you're the kind of person who just likes to scroll through stuff and be like, oh, that's kind of cool, that's interesting, and maybe that's useful, but never act upon it, sure, that's fine content to digest. But if you're looking for real advice on how to actually solve problems, Squat U is not that useful. It's more entertainment than help, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Excuse me. No, I would agree. I think that, I think a lot of what he talks about in general is, you know, 20, 30 years ago, he would have been spot on. But I think just with what we know, where the research is going, especially around like low back pain, like I just feel like there's clearly some more proven thoughts and ideas around low back pain that he does not incorporate. And I think right now with his videos surrounding low back pain, I half the video I'll be like, yeah, that's pretty good. That's solid stuff. And like the other half I'll be like, all right, now you lost me. Like you said, like he means well. I mean, he's clearly mastered the art of, making online content. He has a large following. And so good for him there. But when it comes to some of the raw information that he gives out, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of what we're seeing most up to date in the field versus what is discussed.
And it's not even about most up to date in terms of research. If you have spent any amount of time treating a variety of people with low back pain for this particular video we're going to be talking about, and you really only use the let's work on your proper hip hinge, let's work on your neutral spine and core stability approach for those kinds of people, you will have failed a lot. You like if
Hmm.
you've seen enough people and done it earnestly enough, you will have failed.
Hmm.
Those kinds of teachings and that practice does have merit for some people. Um, it's meant to be part of a complete package of how we think about low back pain. But if that's what you do in isolation, there's 0% chance you're getting all your people better. Like it's just you're lucky if you're getting 25% better. That's a made up number. But like I don't see those tools and those lessons being that effective, even for a younger athletic population. It's a very, very small piece that we use for a portion of the rehab process. And so one thing that really bothers me is just how he says all those things as if they're truth and they're law. And if you aren't doing these things, you aren't going about moving well. And it's like, dude, you're either lying or you have not worked with enough people. I don't mean that
Yeah.
disrespectfully. It's just that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree. And I think that, I excuse my language here, but I think this is why physical therapists get shit on a lot by like the fitness industry. Like I feel like a lot of times PTs get a bad rap, and I feel like it's partially due to stuff like this because it's like, oh, you have low back pain. I'm going to give you the same 3 exercises, and we're going to do it till we're blue in the face, and this is what's going to get you better. And then we did that for freaking decades. And then now it's like, now we're trying to right the ship, but there's still that stigma out there as to PTs being glorified personal trainers, and like PTs, just knowing like the same 2 exercises to give to everyone for quote like core strengthening. And like you see that, or you hear that, and it's like, and then you watch videos like this, and you're like, oh yeah, I can see why people say that, because we still propagate these ideas to be like the cure for low back pain, which again, going back to, just the research again, we know that like low back pain in PT or really any setting, like we gotta, this is maybe my personal opinion, but start getting away from this idea of quote curing it. Just the stats out there does not show that we cure low back pain, right? It shows that it's a very common recurrent thing, and it's more of a, bringing the car in to get the oil change type of thing versus like forever curing it.
Totally. Well, getting into
But
the video,
anyways,
just going moment by moment. So the patient that he was working with had felt low back pain with the Romanian deadlift for the past 2 years. And his major premise was that this person was not hinging at their hips properly, and they were not stabilizing their spine to prevent shear forces at the low back well enough.
hmm
Those two things can certainly be true. I'm not going to say that people with weak, let's just say weak cores, with a weak core and maybe like a poorly coordinated timing and firing of your core muscles can't have some pain, can't have some excessive shear force. Like, yeah, as Louis Simmons says, weak things break. If you're weak in your core, like things are probably going to hurt a bit. And so working on that
hmm
to some degree is going to be helpful. And then if you're trying to make a movement be really efficient and distribute the load as evenly as possible as you can throughout all the different muscle groups that are involved in that movement, having a proper hinge where you're bending at the waist with a mostly neutral spine is going to be really efficient and effective. And so we certainly want to try to get that for a lifter that's training.
I'll just lead right into what I think you were going to say. Hopefully, I finish your thought here, but it's important that we focus on like the form and how we're moving in a very specific way when we're looking at like an athlete in training or a power lifter or an Olympic lifter or, a sport or some reason where it actually matters how we're moving, right? A neutral spine, making sure we're having that proper bracing, etc. I'll just leave that part of that. But if it comes to like someone in their daily lifestyle, right, how they move throughout the day, um, I think it's important that we promote more of this kind of movement exploration, and that we tell people it's okay to move in different ways, that you don't need to have, a rod stapled on your back to move everywhere, where it's just this, linear motion of the spine. It's okay to bend at the back a little bit or even a lot sometimes. And that we want to promote this idea of like, um, being resilient in different ways of movement, not just this, I got to have perfect posture all the time, because we know that people with low back pain are often, they're super rigid. They're like, they don't move. They're just stiff, and their muscles are usually super just over guarding of that low back, not wanting to give way to anything. And at least in my experience, when you tell individuals like, hey, let's start just moving differently. Maybe we bend the back a little bit, maybe we twist a little bit, whatever it is, people tend to loosen up and they tend to feel better. Might not feel better all the way, but feel better to a point where they can go throughout their day to day. Anyways, I think there's a line in the sand we want to draw between, yes, it's good to maintain this neutral spine and core activation with certain things like lifting or training for a sport, versus someone just the everyday individual who's just going about life.
The whole shearing force thing doesn't make any sense to me. Stuart McGill makes a big argument in favor of needing to prevent and stabilize against shear forces because they're the devil. it's like, dude, these things are happening all the time and every single movement you do all over your body. It's not like this thing is terrible. Your body is meant to handle it. Okay. So like the idea of preventing all shear force is silly. It's not going to happen. Your
Yeah.
body has to prevent some under extreme loads, of course, because you want to just be generally robust and resilient and stable in your body to be able to exert maximum force. That just goes without saying for any part of your body, any movement. But you also need your tissues to experience these forces, because if they don't experience those forces, they're not going to be made resilient to them. And then when you are faced with a situation in which you have to use your body in ways that you've been avoiding forever because you're worried about shear forces, you are now less able, less capable of handling those things. You are deconditioned, you have atrophied. And so now you have set yourself up for an even greater risk for injury. And so, like, the whole idea of avoidance and preventing any of these kinds of forces is just, it doesn't make any sense based on how we know the human body adapts.
Yeah. I think that's key to say that the human body adapts, right? Because I think there's this idea. I don't know how you feel about this idea, Christian, but I'm just going to throw it out there and you tell me.
Sure.
I'll oftentimes hear individuals, talk about like this idea of like when you move poorly, let's say, which who the hell knows what that even means, but when you move with like a rounded back or you're twisting or you're bending, however you want to describe it, and you have back pain, that you are constantly re-injuring or re-hurting the back and you're not giving it time to recover, right? I would look at that and say when we move with bending, when we move with twisting, etc., we are allowing the body these chances to have stress and load in a way that it can rebound, adapt, and repair itself so that over time it can tolerate those movements better versus this idea of like, oh, when you bend and twist and all these other things, you don't keep a neutral spine, you're just constantly re-hurting things and making it worse.
Yeah. And think about any sport that has a rotational component. By this logic of your spine needs to be stable to prevent shear forces, and any kind of like BLT type stuff, bending, lifting, twisting, is just bad. You would expect every single golfer to be paralyzed. Like, it just doesn't add up. They're doing high
Mm-hmm.
velocity bending, lifting, twisting all the time, or like any construction worker. So like this stuff is just, it's silly on its face, and even sillier the more that you begin to dive deeper into it. That being said, when people are in a painful state, changing, modifying, or even just holding off on those kinds of movements can be really useful to let things calm down, get your body a chance to desensitize, and then rebuild, re-expose yourself to these things over time in a what we call in PT a graded manner, meaning it's very linear, it's stepwise. It seems to be a pretty safe approach most of the time, and it's going to be our starting point almost every time.
I think like one of the things that I thought about after watching that video was like, you know, at the end of the day, it's like this idea of activity modification and graded exposure, like you alluded to, Christian. You can basically break down any like, I mean, you can break down, where is it? Here it is. Like this good old book right here, Becoming a Supple Leopard, or McGill's Big Three, or, Peter O'Sullivan's CFT approach, or Shirley Sarman, or whoever it is you want to throw their name at. It's at the end of the day is activity modification and graded exposure to get people back to being in less pain, right? Some people move better and work better with different approaches, but at the end of the day, they all incorporate probably some type of change in your movement, some type of, you know, hip core type exercises, pain education, all those different things. It's just like activity modification, you know what it is? It's like a beautiful girl putting on different dresses. That's what it is. You have the Sarman approach. You have the CFT, Kelly Starrett. You have McGill Big Three. These are all just different dresses being put on a beautiful woman that is activity modification and graded exposure. And this video is just another example.
We're just trying to be a bit more comprehensive because all of these different things have value. They have merit. They have a time and a place. It's just it's too narrow of focus to help people, and so
Mhm.
we just can't rely on that one single approach. So let's go into the next major point he makes, which is he taught this athlete how to properly hinge, how to tip over at the waist by shifting the weight backwards a bit, which is going to put more tension on the glutes and hamstrings because they're getting put on stretch with this load and being better balanced with that. And when you put your hamstrings and your glutes on more tension with a proper hinge, your low back is going to face less of that load. Now, a proper hinge is all about balance. When someone lifts a weight in an RDL, they are trying to keep that weight balanced over their base of support. And you can keep that weight balanced any number of ways. You can round your spine more and not hinge as much, or you can hinge a lot more and keep your spine a bit straighter. It's when it comes to this whole idea of shifting the weight to your hips or getting it out of your back, you're really just playing with the way you are balancing the weight and you're shifting the emphasis on different parts of your body to handle that load. The load is the same. So just because you do a better hinge doesn't mean that you're magically cured and things are all better. You've just decreased the amount of that weight that that's going through your low back. You put more of it on your butt and your hammies, which are in this moment not sore. They're not sensitive. And so no wonder it feels better. But at some point, if you keep upping that weight, even if you have a really good hinge, if your back is sore, your back is the weak link in that movement, you are going to feel your back again. And this is where people are like, oh, but I did all the core strengthening and I did all this hinge coaching, and the PTs go through freaking 12 sessions of trying to make you hinge better. It's like, dude, like this is not complicated. Like squat, bench, and deadlift are some of the most rudimentary movements out there. This is not hard stuff to coach. You don't need that much time with it. Try coaching a golf swing or a throw or sprinting. Anything that involves multiple planes of movement with high velocity is way more complex than a freaking hinge.
One of the points I was going to talk about goes along with this is that I like doing the RDL for myself, partly because I just know that I'm loading my spine. Like I'm making my lumbar paraspinals have to and you know uh, kind of lift, you might say, some of this load. I'm not using my back to do it, right? I'm hip hinging. Yeah, I feel my hamstrings, I feel my glutes, etc. But to your point, it's like, 200 pounds is still 200 pounds, right? I don't care if you're using every single fiber of your hamstring and glutes, that weight is still anterior and it's still creating a moment arm along that low back. And because of that, you're still going to get whatever type of forces, shear forces, whatever you want to call it, you're still going to get these forces on the low back despite moving perfectly, right? It just depends of how much you can handle, how much your tissues in that lumbar spine can tolerate. And yeah, for some people, we just need to start really, really small, right? And for others, you might just do a little bit too much. But this idea that like we activated the hamstrings more, now physics doesn't come into play. Like again, the weight's still anterior and it's still creating a lever around the low back. Just because you activate certain muscles doesn't mean gravity just stopped working.
Totally. And think about someone who has to use their back and they don't really get much contribution from their hamstrings and their glutes. The one that we see every single spring and I guess every winter. So every winter upcoming, people that have to shovel snow. You really don't get a whole lot of recruitment out of your hamstrings and your butt. There's going to be a lot of low back loading all of a sudden. And if you're not really accustomed to that, you're going to be quite sore. And in the spring, it's gardening. I get a lot of clients who do a ton of gardening out here and they're kneeling. When you're kneeling, you're not going to get your leg muscles to help you nearly as much. They're more relaxed. And therefore, you have to use your back more than it typically might be used to, especially for a long period of time. And that stuff's exhausting. And if you don't have a resilient and a strong back, you are going to feel it. You're probably going to feel it anyways, even if you do have a strong back. I know I get a little sore in my back, even though I regularly lift weights with hinge patterns whenever I shovel or garden. It's just like the natural way things work. You're only as good as what you've done lately. And if you have not been using your back in that way, it is not quite ready to do it that well. And so people just have to understand that your back needs to be strengthened too. I think of it this way too. It's like people grip things every single day. I am holding this coffee mug. I have to use my shoulder and my elbow muscles to move the damn thing around. But at the end of the day, my grip is still working. My forearm is doing stuff. My back is the
Yeah.
same way when I lift stuff. Maybe the hips and the knees are doing the bulk of the moving of the object, but the back is along for the ride and has to be strong
Mhm.
enough to do the thing.
So I'm just looking over some of the things that I had down there. Yeah. So I think lastly, the last point to get into is kind of addressing the elephant in the room of what is the McGill Big Three. I know that you had some thoughts on that, Christian. And again, I'll just reiterate about my thought on activity modification and graded exposure. There's I don't understand the like who bestowed the special nature among the McGill Big Three.
Stuart McGill.
Okay, fair enough. Who outside of him put the McGill Big Three on the pedestal, right? Like I would bet I don't have a house right now, but I would bet a house loan that you can find just about any type of movement that's gonna, if you put EMG sensors like in those specific areas that they're talking about within the spine and the trunk musculature, etc. I bet you could just carry a kettlebell around and you would get just as much muscle activation in those areas just by loading the spine and standing or something. Like it's always these like specific movements. It's the bird dog. It's the son of a bit. I don't even know what else it might be.
The McGill
I don't
Big
even have
Three.
it on the top of my head. Yeah. All I know is
Curl
like
up,
the bird
bird
dog
dog,
one.
side plank.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, cool. You could do 20 other things and it's gonna activate the same stuff. And probably be a little bit more specific to movements of daily life or sport or activity that you're trying to improve or get back to. I
I've
didn't
been
know that I
away.
had a thought on the McGill Big Three, but I guess I did have a thought on the Big Three. So there you go. Done with mine.
I haven't read Stuart McGill's official work in many years, but at the time when I read it in his own writings, the whole purpose around the McGill Big Three were that they create a lot of core activation, meaning that if you put a bunch of sensors on people and you look at their deep lumbar multifidi, which are like the muscles on your low back, you look at your all layers of your abs, your transverse abdominis, internal obliques, external obliques, and your rectus abdominis. All that stuff is firing a lot, meaning like there's a lot of electrical signal that happens with those exercises. And the other major component of the McGill Big Three are that Stuart McGill also measured the shear forces and compressive forces that happen at the spine during those movements, and many others actually. And those three stood out as having the least amount of shear and compressive force of the spine. And so he posited that if we want to find the most efficient or effective exercises to help people with low back pain, you want to get a ton of core activation with little shear and compressive force. And so that is why he settled on those, which totally reasonable approach. But just like you said, Eric, they're not the end all be all. They're a really good starting point for exercises to have people with low back pain begin with because they are so low intensity. They're very low risk. They're unlikely to piss someone's back pain off. And so if you're trying to get someone with pretty bad low back pain to just get reacquainted with movement, desensitized, meaning like you're trying to get the muscles to contract in a way that feels good, that leads to an analgesic effect. It makes you feel better. Kind of like
Mhm.
getting warm after being really stiff before a run. You're like, okay, now that I'm warm, I feel a lot looser. That's kind of what the McGill Big Three do. They're going to make you feel better without pissing things off too bad. And so that's a great starting point. But the exact reason, the exact reason why Dr. Stuart McGill recommends using them, meaning there's low shear and compressive force, is the exact reason why they're not useful long term, because you need people to get exposed to shear and compressive forces in order to do literally anything in life.
And I mean, I don't want in the midst of my mini rant there, I don't want to come off as saying like the McGill Big Three are inherently bad. I think they're kind of like you said, Christian, they're a good starting point. They're things to do, but they're one of many things you could do. And, like, and here's the other thing too, like with people with, pretty intense low back pain or even not that intense low back pain, like I've given the bird dogs before, like I've given curl ups, I've given dead bugs, like I've given these different, like, quote, simple exercises. And like, even though the patient's doing them right, it can still piss off their back. I think that's important to keep in mind because not everyone is the same, right? Everyone's different, especially when you talk about the pain experience. And I think where my problem lies with it is this notion, and I think Squat University, I think he's trying to get sponsored by Stuart McGill. I don't know what exactly his goal is,
Gotta be by now.
but when you bring it up like it's gospel and you say like McGill Big Three, McGill Big Three, these different movements, all of it, like whatever it is, kind of like you mentioned earlier on, Christian, in the beginning of the video, like either you're ignorant to what is out there or you just haven't worked with enough people. Because for how much you say that this stuff works, it really doesn't work. And like that's why we're going in different directions for people who are actually like boots on the ground in the clinic seeing people day in and day out, because we've realized, like I said, I've given these different low risk movement core stability type exercises and their pain still gets worse with it. So anyways, I don't want to go too far down in the rabbit hole, but I don't think that the McGill Big Three are inherently bad. They're one of many that can be good starting points. And I think it's important, kind of like you said, Christian, too, is that's not the long-term solution, that we should be putting the body through stress and load, especially the low back, so that it can adapt and become resilient as being the long-term solution.
The other major issue with the McGill Big Three is that they're not sport specific for like any sport. I'm trying to think about one that maybe it is specific to. I don't know. Can you think of one? I really don't think there's any. I'm sure
I
one
mean, I
exists, but
guess
anyway.
like, yeah, I guess like if you get tackled in football and you have to get up from the ground, or you fall
Yeah, well,
over in
that's like
basketball,
just do a get
you
up,
have
sit
to.
up instead. Like do push-ups.
That's the only thing I
Anyways,
can think of.
yeah. So like what I'm getting at is that when it comes to trying to get better at a thing,
Hmm.
the the fundamental, I guess I would just call it a law at this point of strength and
Yeah,
conditioning, is that you need the exercises you do to become more specific to the task at hand over time. And it's okay to have things that are less specific and more specific. I do strongly encourage that for variety, but generally you want to be trending in a more specific direction over time. And the McGill Big Three just don't do that for any sport, especially powerlifting. And I see
yeah,
this a lot every single day. I'm at the rock climbing gym where a lot of people will train in the fitness area and they're doing a lot of core work, because core really is important for rock climbing, much more than a lot of other sports. And they're doing things like crunches, sit-ups, planks, Russian twists, dead bugs. And it's like, those will make your abs work. You will feel some tension and some burning in your abs, but the way you're making the muscles contract and the qualities that you're trying to build have almost zero translation to your performance on the wall, because they aren't replicating the movements that your body has to go through on the wall. Better options for training your abs and rock climbing would be things like hollow leg raises. I guess the dying bug one sort of is an introductory way, but hollow leg raises, eventually things like hanging leg raises, dragon flags, front levers, movements that make you really work the crap out of your abs, especially lifting your legs to help keep your legs on the rock wall. That is what I mean by specificity. And if you aren't training your body with core work in this context, that's getting more specific to the task at hand, you're not really getting much out of it.
I think you made some of those exercises up. You say like dragonfly at one point. I don't even know what you
Dragon
said.
flag. You don't know dragon flags? Dude, I love doing those. But it's like part of my favorite core exercise.
Really? I'll have to
Yeah,
look it
it's
up.
one of my top five favorite superset is going to be bench press dragon flag.
Okay.
You look up what
Okay.
a dragon flag is, and you're gonna be like, oh, okay, I get it. Christian's also lazy. He doesn't want to move, which is why it's a great superset.
Oh, okay. I see now. Okay. Yeah. 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 All right. Respect. Cool.
And so when you think about core work that is specific to powerlifting, and maybe this athlete, I don't know, maybe she's a CrossFitter, and that's a bit different than powerlifting. But for a
Hmm.
powerlifter, like there really isn't a whole lot of core work that's specific. The core work you choose if you want to do some is going to be really whatever you want because your core is getting absolutely fried in a deadlift in a squat.
Oh yeah.
They're like that's undeniable. If you're doing it well, you got a good strong brace to help improve your force transfer from the bar through your feet. Your core is just trying to be really rigid and it's along for the ride, but that immense force going through you to stabilize the barbell so you don't just crumble underneath it, that is your
Hmm.
core work.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And that's my whole point about the, like, you could literally choose anything to make the core work. I mean, it's like this whole idea of like having like glute amnesia, like your glutes fell asleep. Like if your glutes fell asleep and they are paralyzed, like good luck doing anything except for laying on your back, right? And like the same thing with the core. Like if we're doing if we're just living life or if we're carrying an object or if we're moving about the hips or the trunk at all, like again, this just goes back to my whole point. Like I would bet a mortgage that, there's daily activities that we do that will produce similar, if not more, muscle activation. Now, granted, to the point of, like you mentioned with the McGill Big Three, is that it's all about also reducing the shear forces or the stress on the back while still activating those core musculature. Um, to which obviously, if someone comes in with low back pain, you don't just throw 100 pounds on them and say carry this. That's you don't do that. Um, but and I might be alone in this camp, but I think it's important not to be afraid of this idea of like loading and this sheer force that sounds so terrible. I think it's important that we shouldn't be afraid of those things. We're literally propagating this idea of being fearful of certain movements, right? Like with these words that we're using, like creating shear force or straining your low back or whatever it is. Like in hindsight, I would argue that those things are good at the appropriate load and the appropriate intensity and the appropriate volume, right? That might mean someone has zero weight to start out with and they're just doing body movements, right? So it might look different for everybody. But I think that this idea of like, oh, you're moving the wrong way and that's why we're getting like these shear forces and that's why your back is falling apart and you're going to be bedridden in 10 years, whatever crappy story you want to say. The amount of people I see coming in a clinic with low back pain and they're stiff as a board and they brag about how perfect of a posture they have, but yet their back still kills. And they brag about how much core activation they're doing, yet their back still kills. It's like maybe we're missing the point with some of this stuff.
I'm really glad you made your last comment about the people that have done all the core work, yet they're still seeing you and they still have low back pain. It's like, yeah, like those people exist. That is the vast majority of people. Because what's the one thing people know about low back pain? Core. They're like, every single person's like, I got to work on my core. Yeah, great. Well, let's do that. And then let's see how far you get. And for some people, that is honestly what they needed. And it worked really well. And now they're good for a while. But sometimes you get the clients that come in, they're like, I've been to two different PTs over a number of years or whatever, Cairo. I've been working on my core nonstop and I'm still in back pain. I guess my core is not strong enough. Or I really do a really good job of lifting with my legs and using my knees and trying to keep my back more upright when I bend over and lift things. I'm not using my back, yet my back still hurts. It's like, yeah, those aren't the answer. And so you just can't hang your hat on those things being the most effective thing. But all these different guidelines of keeping a neutral spine and lifting with your legs and trying not to bend over and doing the core work, they all come from a good place. I'm not here to say that people have malicious intent with giving these recommendations. People mean well. They want you to get better. It's just that these things are limited in how beneficial they can be. And you have to expand your approach if you really want to get the most people better. And that's just kind of how we think about things. Because we've seen those folks that come in and they're failing, or we've tried a certain approach. I've tried the core stability approach with people before, and it leaves things to be desired. And then you have to figure out, okay, what's next? What else can we do for people?
Yeah.
And I have this very strong belief. I can't say it's backed up by a whole lot of evidence, but one of my core beliefs in physical therapy is that people generally have weak backs. I truly believe that. I think the vast majority, at least Americans, vast majority of Americans are weak as hell. They don't lift heavy things at all, and their backs are incredibly deconditioned, especially with all the sitting that we do. And so a major reason people get low back pain is their backs are just out of shape. And if you don't train the back itself, if you only focus on the abs, and when I say train the back, I mean lift heavy stuff with deadlifting type patterns and carrying patterns, I think that you're just more likely to be messed up. What do you think about that,
Yeah.
Eric?
I would back you on that. I'd support you on that belief, even if it's not fully backed. I think that's a valid way of thinking about things. And the other thing I wanted to say, and this might be the last, dramatic point that I have to make, is this idea with like low back pain and people come in, and you even mentioned it, Christian. People come in and they're like, I've worked on my core for the last 6 months. I've done all of these like core activation exercises, and I sit with perfect posture. And I hear people all the time, they say stuff like, I guess my core isn't strong enough. I guess my posture is too bad. I guess like all these things. And all I'm hearing is like, we as a healthcare industry, if it's medical physicians, chiropractors, PTs, I'll even lump in personal trainers and strength and conditioning coaches, like, and especially these freaking online videos that we see, like, all we're doing is promoting people to just have this like self-doubt and self-blame as to why they're in all this pain, and as to why their back hurts is because they're not strong enough, their posture isn't good enough, all these other things. And like the amount of people that have sat in the room with me telling me their story, and they just start breaking down in tears because of all the blaming they do on themselves. And like at the end of the day, they're like, I can't do anything because my back hurts and it's my fault. And like that's what they've come away with the last year and change, or 10 years of, trying to receive medical help, is that at the end of the day, it's their fault. Like that's such BS. As a healthcare industry, we've put those people in that position. If they're not getting better, like, we've given them the golden ticket of core strengthening and posture. And if they're not getting better, it's their fault that they're not good enough with their core strength and their posture. And I think that if we continue to keep going down that line, like, we're just like, we're never going to get out of this. I don't know if you'd call it an epidemic, but we know how much chronic low back pain is on the healthcare industry in terms of medical dollars. Like, we're never going to get out of that if we don't start changing our mindset.
The problem's only getting worse. I'm not saying I know all the
Absolutely.
answers for that, but the problem is only getting worse, not just in the States, it's happening worldwide. But that's a different conversation. The last thing I wanted
Yeah.
to just say is we've talked exclusively about core work and hip hinging and all that for low back pain. That's what this video was all about. One thing that people need to understand is that sometimes doing that kind of work is not going to get you better on its own. I have a guy
Hmm.
right now who saw a different therapist earlier this year, it was earlier in the spring, for acute low back pain. He got a bit better over time, but his therapist really only worked on core work, very simple core work, kind of like the McGill Big Three, and told him don't move your back that much, like try to keep a neutral spine, etc. And he just got frustrated. His back pain was lingering quite a bit, and he just wanted to take a break took a break, saw his primary care doctor in the summer, and his primary care doctor was like, I think you just need to go back to PT, go with a different PT, try a different approach, but I also want you to work a lot harder on this core work and do some higher level things. And so I end up seeing him, I hear his story, and I'm like, okay, that all makes sense. I do want to help you get stronger and do this harder work that your doctor is recommending. But did you also consider that you might just be really tight in the muscles and maybe calming that stuff down with things like massage or needling or cracking could be really useful? And he's like, no, no one ever did that for me yet. And I'm like, okay, are you open to me doing those things? And he's like, absolutely. Dude, I cracked his back, his low back, and I think I needled his low back as well in that very first session. But after the first thing I did, the first crack, he got up. He's like, "Oh my god, oh my, it's so much better." And then I
Yeah.
needled it. He's like, "It's even better."
Yeah.
I think I've seen him
Yeah.
3 or 4 times. We've done that sort of approach of do an adjustment first thing, do some needling, and then go exercise. Uh, and every single time I've seen him, he's like, "My back pain is so much better." It's
Yeah.
like it's almost all the way gone. I feel great. And I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that just because sometimes you need to do other things besides these kinds of exercises, and a combo approach of some hands-on work with exercise is often very, very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the term that you've coined when it comes to those things, Christian, I'm going to give you credit for it, is sometimes you got to do the dark arts. You know what I
The
mean?
dark art.
Sometimes you got to do it. You got to go to the dark side. You got to needle. You got to crack some backs. Um,
Have to.
sometimes that's sometimes that's what people need. All right. Well, again, this whole conversation stemmed from Squat University's short 40-second video on hip hinging and low back pain. I think it's important that Christian and I try and get what we believe to be true out there in terms of the messaging around low back pain, and try and help people out in ways that we can.